on Rocha from the University of Cambridge, who is talking about the other baby killer, the politics of sweetened condensed milk in Malaysia in the 70s and 80s.
Thanks very much. Can you all hear me okay? Cool. Let me just load up the PowerPoint. There it is. Okay, so my talk today is based on an accidental discovery. I was working at Yale University in the library, and I was looking through its enormous collection on Asian science and medicine and technology. And I'm generally known as a historian of sex and reproduction in China, so this is sort of a little bit of a side interest that I have right now. And I stumbled upon, in the library, a pamphlet which was published in 1981 by the Consumers Association of Penang in Malaysia, and it had an extremely provocative title, The Other Baby Killer, with a photo of a severely malnourished infant on its front cover. And the pamphlet was also carried forward by Wong Hock Boon, or Wang Shewen in Mandarin. And Wong Hock Boon was professor at the National University of Singapore, and he was widely known as the father of pediatrics in Southeast Asia, and he was sometimes called in Singaporean media Mr. Breastfeeding. And he wrote a very passionate condemnation of condensed milk in the pamphlet, which immediately caught my attention because I know condensed milk as a pretty innocent and harmless product. You can still buy it in most supermarkets, and there is actually a recent resurgence in the States with chefs on TV claiming that if you use sweetened condensed milk, then you get a better chocolate fudge or key lime pie. And you can find it very often too in Asian cuisine, where tea and coffee are often served with condensed milk, and many desserts are prepared using it. And so when I was growing up in Hong Kong as a child, I often ate buttered white toast, with the corners cut off, of course, with condensed milk generously poured on top. So the question that I had was, how did condensed milk come to be identified by Wong Hock Boon and his colleagues, and the Consumers Association of Penang, as a baby killer? So I started working my way backwards. So my talk today is going to be divided into two halves. First, I'm actually going to go through the history of sweetened condensed milk, because I don't want to assume that everybody knows that already. There is actually plenty of really brilliant scholarship on the history of milk in general around the world. One thinks of, for instance, Rima Appel's wonderful books, Mothers and Medicine and Perfect Motherhood, or Melanie Dupuy's excellent book on how milk became America's national drink, and Lawrence Weaver, who is not here today, has written about the definition of the milk requirements of infants in the late 19th and early 20th century, and a really, really amazing paper in the Social History of Medicine. And Barbara Orland, who also cannot be here today, has published on alpine milk and on the use of cows in the dairy industry, and so on and so forth. But the global history of condensed milk, as far as I know, is yet to be written. So I think this is a promising line of inquiry, hopefully. And I'm then going to address, in the second half of my talk, the politics of sweetened condensed milk in Southeast Asia, and I'm going to use precisely this pamphlet, The Other Baby Killer, as a point of anchorage. Our story begins in Crystal Palace in 1851. At the Great Exhibition of London, 5 American entrepreneurs were awarded with gold medals for their inventions. These 5 men were Cyrus McCormick from Chicago for his Virginia Reaper, in other words, a harvester; David Dick from Medfield, Pennsylvania for his anti-friction compress for pressing sheet metal; Charles Goodyear, as in Goodyear and Michelin and so on and so forth, from New Haven, Connecticut for his India rubber fabrics; Bond and Son from Boston, Massachusetts for an electric clock; and finally, Gail Borden Jr. from Galveston, Texas for his meat biscuit, or portable soup bread. And this is a quote from the chairman of the jurors at Crystal Palace. The meat biscuit, or the portable soup bread, was one of the most important discoveries of the age. Its value as a compact, portable, preserved food is of great importance to our country, i.e. Britain. And for 1 pound of it contains as much nutriment as 8 pounds of beef. It can be carried in canisters from pole to pole, the North Pole to South Pole, whatever, without fear of spoiling. It is exceedingly useful for seamen and travelers, and in this respect, the meat biscuit is more valuable for our people, i.e. the British people, who are such great sailors and travelers than any other people in the world. And this was precisely what Gale Borden, born in 1801 and died in 1874, was interested in. Gale Borden was absolutely fascinated by the possibility of producing compact, portable, preserved food items which could be used on explorations, expeditions, especially long journeys across oceans. In other words, one could argue that Borden was definitely one of the actors who contributed to colonial modernity. Borden tried his hand on preserving meat, tea, coffee, and fruit juices. And when he traveled back from Britain to the United States on ship with his gold medal in his hand, he observed that there were increasing number of infants undergoing transatlantic journeys, which raised a particular problem. The young children needed milk, and so there needed to be cows on ships. And the cows became seasick and couldn't produce enough of it. So Borden sort of little light bulb, well, there were no light bulbs back then, but you could sort of imagine, sort of moment of inspiration. He sort of set about producing a compact, portable, preserved form of milk. And he came up with a successful method. Evaporation of milk in a copper vacuum condenser, which removes approximately 75 to 80% of water, and then adding substantial quantity of sugar to increase its osmotic pressure so that bacteria won't be able to grow. And then finally, sealing the products in cans. And on 19th of August 1856, Gale Borden received US patent number 15553 for sweetened condensed milk. And in 1857, Gale Borden set up his own company, which became the New York Condensed Milk Company, and it manufactured Eagle brand condensed milk. And the August 1957 issue of Scientific American reported that the condensed milk was, quote, one of the products that would change the world. And later, in 1919, the New York Condensed Milk Company became Borden Foods and branched out to manufacture other food products. And finally, it was bought out by Schmuckers in 2001. And during the Civil War, Gale Borden's company dramatically expanded as it supplied condensed milk for the Northern Army. Around the late 1860s, a number of companies began to market competing products. For instance, the Anglo-Swiss Condensed Milk Company, established by Charles Page and George Page in 1867 in Cham, roughly 20 miles south of Zurich. Charles Page and George Page manufactured condensed milk in Switzerland, which was exported to Britain to compete against Gale Borden's products. The famous pharmacist and industrialist Henri Nestlé invented in 1866 an infant food made from milk, malt, sugar, and wheat, and set up in 1870 his company in Vevey on the eastern side of Lake Geneva. And so fast forward a little bit to 1905, Anglo-Swiss Condensed Milk Company merged with Nestlé, which of course then subsequently became the largest consumer packaged food corporation in the entire world. Meanwhile, in 1899, Elbridge Amos Stewart founded the Pacific Coast Condensed Milk Company in Kent, in Washington State, not in this country. And his engineer, Jean-Baptiste Meyenberg, invented evaporated milk, i.e. condensed milk treated at a higher temperature and containing less sugar, or no sugar at all. In 1901, Pacific Coast became Carnation, until it was again bought out in 1985 by Nestlé. Oops, here you go.